Hi, my name is Patricia Allingham Carlson, and this is my video of how I painted Sun Kings. This is a sunflower painting that I recently did, and I'm going to show you my step-by-step approach to it. I learned some new things and I tried some new things. I hope you enjoy it. Give it a thumbs up. Now let's paint. To begin this painting, I got out a book of Van Gogh's art, and I looked through at his sunflower paintings. What made them so wonderful, so spectacular? What was he doing, and what was he saying and conveying that I could learn from and improve my own work? Now, I know he was using oil paint and I'm using watercolor, but I did get a couple ideas and some things to try. I began my painting by sketching lightly in watercolor. I find this is a little bit less restrictive for me than doing a pencil sketch. So, using some pale paint, I began to outline watercolor basics, where the petals were, where they might fall, where some of the folded petals were, where I wanted to put some leaves and stems. And I was looking at my reference photo from a bouquet of sunflowers I'd purchased. I had taken a lot of pictures, so I did get one that was, or two that were decent compositions. So I chose one of them and began to sketch. Once I had the painting sketched in with watercolor, I then began the background. Now, both of Van Gogh's wonderful sunflower paintings had very solid, rather one-color choice backgrounds. And I had decided already to make my background full of lots of colors, complementary colors to the sunflowers, and some strong darks. So that is how I began. I wet down some areas around where the sunflowers were, where I'd painted the petals, and began to come in with some color blocking. Colors you see so far are yellow ochre, spring green or sap green, quin magenta, and cobalt blue, with some ultramarine blue too. Got a few basics and came in to work on the seed part in the middle of each sunflower. So, like I said, I'm just sketching this on. What I noticed about Van Gogh's center seed parts were that he used some different colors and treated them with a lot of textural interest. They were almost done like bullseye targets. In previous sunflower paintings that I'd done, I'd made them mostly one color, with a slightly darker center. So I liked his approach and decided to try a few that way. As you can see, I'm painting in the petals by defining the outside of them. Sort of like a negative painting. I'm bringing it out loosely with pale colors. These will get darker, but I'm painting as I feel at the moment. The background that I'm actually looking at is very different, and I'm just painting what feels right. It's an experiment for me. So why not try some new things? I'm also using Hooker's Green Dark at this point. And I did want to have some very dark colors around the sunflowers. I thought that would be fun to see how they would pop. Where the color is getting really dark, I've brought in some indigo to mix with the Hooker's Green Dark. It'll be interesting to see how much lighter these colors keep drying. And eventually they did get a lot of layers of color. Up at the top of the painting, I'm coming in with a color called Viridian. It's a kind of green. It almost goes toward teal. It's a fresh color and it's a pretty color. The reason I brought in the purple was because the sunflowers are so yellow-orange, and purple is a nice complementary color. I wanted to see a visual play between the flower color and the background color. If I put a purplish color in one spot in the background, generally I will try to include it into another place as well. And up here at the top, I am including more ultramarine blue, which to my eye has a purplish tint to it. All these little petals and trying to get their directions is a bit of a challenge. But I'm taking my time and I'm looking at what Van Gogh did with the spiky, I guess you would call it blossom covers. They're a greenish color and they all wrap up into the bud and cover it up. When they open, they spikily hang down around the flower and they're quite interesting. So looking at Van Gogh's spikies, I decided to try to delineate and make mine stand out a little more because that was something I had not done before. Now I just decided to put some quin yellow, or quin gold rather, into the bottom leaf. And I was thinking, my way of thinking was that that would pull the sunflower color down into the leaf. And it might look nice. Because I was so excited to get to the sunflower color, I decided to begin on some petals. I pulled in some very strong vermilion color and then decided to bring in some more red into the background. Not exactly realistic, but I liked how it looked. So at some point I decided to add more red, and I decided to add more red to the flowers as well. Deepening the ultramarine blue and putting in a little more purple. And when I am adding these colors, I like how they look. So, going with it. This is an experiment, and what did I have to lose? In my photograph, there were some very strong lights, darks, and contrasts on the petals. I started them as yellow because many of them had a very strong sunlit side. And then I covered the yellow over with chrome orange and some vermilion. When I wanted the color to get even darker, I brought in some burnt sienna. As I worked, I realized I was making each flower with a different approach on the petals, which didn't bother me. I decided maybe I could see which one looks the best and continue in that way. This one was a wash, starting with a darker color, washing toward a yellow. And then I jumped up to the top to finish the background. And to start finishing the background, I outlined the petals that were up there on the top flower. I also did some development of color around the spikies for the top flower. And then decided a leaf might look good up there. So I began painting a leaf and left some vein areas white so I could make them a different color if I chose to. I'm looking closely at Van Gogh's spikies, the outer petal coverings, the green ones, so I can get some ideas for colors and how he used them. And then I jumped in with some cobalt blue and some turquoise for the background. A little lifting along the way where it looked too dark. And the area where I'm painting right now was the most sunlit of the whole painting. So I'm trying to keep the petals very pale. In fact, I think I'm using cadmium yellow pale. Now, can you notice that I'm also blending out the edges of each petal against the background? I did not want them to be hard edge. I wanted them to be soft and appear sunlit, almost bleached out by the sun on the edges. So I'm softening them with my damp brush. This takes some repeated going over times, but I liked the look and it gave me the softness that I wanted. Everything does not have to be hard edge and in sharp focus. As the petals near the base and join up with the greenish spiky area, they become darker. Here I'm using a light mix of vermilion. I'm painting some of the lines in between the petals as well. It would be interesting to make a painting that was all soft edge with even less definition. Maybe I'll try that in the future. I'm working on that top leaf again. I'm deepening the color with Hooker Green Dark toward the bottom, lightening it toward the top with Sap Green and some yellows. There's some interesting folds in this leaf and I'm trying to paint them as well. I've lightly painted over the veins I left in the leaf. If I continued to paint over top of that, I could make them disappear, but I wanted to keep them, so I control how much I paint over top and how many strokes I use on top. Coming back to the painting, I just started another session. I noticed that the whole top right-hand corner is very pale. So I begin bringing in some darks and brighter areas around the flower, so the flower itself will stand out more. I begin adding a little background color with some cobalt blue mixed with some turquoise. And I'm not using it everywhere, but rather taking breaks and softening where I paint one color on top. And I'm going to move on to another flower because I'm not sure exactly what to do about that whole area. I am liking some of the strong contrast in the lower areas and on the left. So next I begin to develop the petals on the top left. Sunflower, leaving strong light areas where there is sunlight shining on it, and darks where it gets darker as it goes down toward the center. That vermilion is coming in handy here, but I am finding I'm having to put on several layers to get it as bright as I want it to be. I'm also using cadmium yellow medium along with the cadmium yellow pale or light. I'm not sure what it's called. And at this point, I've begun using a little cadmium red. And that really pops for me against that viridian at the top left. Now there's a lot of play on petals covering each other, leaves covering things, and petals covering leaves. So I'm trying to keep on top of it and pay attention to what I'm doing so I don't get lost. Because this is a lot of petals. I'm painting in the leaf to the top left. This leaf had some strong dark folds in it, some strong lights on it. And I'm trying to simulate those folds and the darks and lights. I'm starting with the central vein in orange and yellow. I'm painting the yellows along the edge where the sunlight is striking it. And next I come in with some hooker green dark to put in my really strong darks toward the center of the leaf. I've also brought in some indigo, as you can see, and that's got a faint bluish tone coming in close to where some of the darks are in the flower petals. And back to tackle the bottom sunflower and some of those petals. Everything was painted yellow in this area. And then while it was wet, I brought in some of my vermilion and let it bleed and blend outward toward the edge, which it gets lighter on the edge. Building up a little more color layering in some spots as well. While I have that color on my brush, might as well use it. I'm making some color notes for myself. I wanted to see which red would give me the best effects for what I was picturing. So I'm trying some different reds that I have. I have cadmium red, I have quin red, I have alizarin crimson, I have permanent pink, and then I'm layering some colors with vermilion as well. And you know, I decided I like the quin red the best. So that is how I'm proceeding. And when it gets a little too pink, I'm adding some vermilion. And that's giving me the tones that I wanted. I'm turning to the last sunflower, which is the central one. For me, it's like doing the most important part of the painting. Of course, every part is of importance in an overall composition, but the front center one is maybe a little bit more important because it's what's going to be seen most prominently in the entire painting. Did you notice I just added some more red into the background? I liked how that red worked. And I think I'll add even more. In order to form the flower of the central one in the middle, I am putting in the seed part of the top one because that is going to form the petals of the lower one and help it to make more sense. So I don't get lost when I'm painting all those petals. Now my center will get darker there, but I decided to add a coat of red and purple mixed together with a little bit of burnt sienna to form a basic color. And now I'm seeing where would some purple look good in the background. So I'm holding up a card with some purple and some ultramarine blue I painted ahead to see where it should be added or could be added in the background to add something. So what do you think of the area I chose there to add a little light purple? It worked for me. I guess it wouldn't work for everybody. Some people might think that was too much. Now I'm going back to this upper right corner to try to make some areas of the flower stand out a little bit more in the general composition. It could be nice and light in the background, but there has to be some areas of accent in the flower and those little spiky petal things. Now I'm painting some purple on top of some turquoise. I'm not sure if I like the color I'm getting. I can adjust it, hopefully, if I decide I don't like it. And I'm now working on the sideways formation of those remaining petals. 31, 37, skip ahead. Now I'm going back to the edges of these petals on the bottom sunflower, and I'm softening just like I did on the top one. If I make all the edges a little softer, I think it'll help the petals to be a little softer and the flowers to look a little softer. So I'm taking my time, I'm lifting a little color on some edges, but just generally softening them against the background. Soft enough, and I begin on the complicated petals of the central sunflower. There are some shorter and some folded up petals on this plant that go in front of the further back, straighter ones. I've got to figure out how to convey that they're folded up and foreshortened. And one of the ways to show foreshortening is to show that it is shorter, but wider, and then to use the shading so that it's lighter at the edge that sticks out toward you or toward the viewer, and darker toward the center. That's what I'm trying to form with my sketch here. They'll look a little more clear when they aren't all yellow. But for right now, I am sketching them in, and they all overlap the outer petals. With the placement of all these petals outlined, I'm now going in and beginning some shading. The easiest petals to paint are the outside ones that are overlapped by the more intricate folded ones. So I can go through them pretty quickly. I'm continuing to use a mixture of vermilion, yellow, and some quin red. In some cases, I brought in a little bit of ochre as well. And the ochre gives me a slightly more subtle color. Ochre is sort of like a subdued yellow. And so this painting continues, petal by petal, as I fill in and paint around and shade. But it is fun to play with these colors and placing them against each other to see what really pops off each other. I think the red and the purple really send each other flying, as well as the red and the green. And that's the beauty of painting with complementary colors. Now, oranges and blues do the same thing. So I have a number of complementary setups in this painting. I should mention that I changed my water a lot for this painting. As I was pulling in greens here and there, I wanted to make sure that the yellow stayed fresh and clean. So I did get up and dump my water and wash out my container a number of times. Sometimes once a day, sometimes twice a day, depending on what I was adding as far as color. You do not want to use dirty water if you want to have fresh and really clean colors. Just keep it in mind. Where one petal is overlapping another, the one on top will be the brighter one. The one on the bottom obviously will be the shaded one. And this shows the placement, and it also adds dimension and depth to the painting. Here I'm painting one of the folded over leaves that are foreshortened and facing outward toward the viewer. Darker at the bottom, lighter at the tip. Also, the shape is drawn shorter and facing outward. Here I'm doing my blocking off strategy and seeing what side's working, what might be needed. Where might I need more red? Where might I need more purple? Darks? Where is it too dark? And doing some blocking off like this really helps me. I just saw that I needed to add another layer of darkness to the bottom leaves and to soften these top petals. I've added a lot more shading into the petals. I think I've differentiated them enough from each other. And now I'm going back and working on my centers. I've tried to leave a lighter ring on this top sunflower. And I'm looking very closely at my photographic reference to see just how do the center and the petals fit together. Now I've mixed together some sepia and some purple for this layer. I am coming in with some red as well. My purple is still the Quin Violet. And this flower is getting a very dark center. Looks like a little eyeball. Looking for some more dark places to paint so I can pop the flowers more, make them stand out, give them an accent. I've torn up some scrap paper and I'm trying them in different places. To add this darkness, I am mixing together purple, hooker's green, dark, and indigo. Once I put the color on, I'm almost always softening the edge to blend it into what is already there. I hadn't put any stems in till now, so I decided to add one, or maybe two. Here I'm darkening that top leaf, the one with all the folds. Also darkening a leaf along the left that's sort of blurred, as well as the one on the bottom. You notice I leave a little light area in the center of the leaf, and the reason for that is to add some shading, some shadow, some light effect, a little more interest in how the leaf is treating the light and how the light's shining on it. I think it looks better that way than just one flat color. Now I'm using my scrap paper again to see where some darker color might look good. And I think that worked. I'm looking back over the entire painting at this point, very close to being done, and darkening a few areas for some additional accent work. I pictured the background of this one to be much darker than my normal sunflower paintings. And I think I've succeeded. And I didn't just make it dark, but I made some pretty color combinations in there too. That was another one of my goals. Some final softening is going on the petals as well. Anywhere they looked a little too hard edge, and I didn't want that look, I'm softening them with a damp brush. I'm signing this painting and calling it done. Hope you enjoyed my video of how I painted Sun Kings. This was a very long and drawn out process for me. And I think the parts that I enjoyed the very most was where I just put down the colors and didn't think all that hard about where they were going or what they were doing. Much more adjustment as time went on with this painting, and many, many petals to paint. It was an interesting painting, and it was also interesting having Van Gogh sitting right in front of me in my art books. What I learned from painting and looking at his work was how to delineate some of the outer coverings, the green spiky areas of the sunflowers, and to make them a little more important in the picture. I also looked at how he did his centers of his sunflowers. Instead of making them all one flat color, I made some of the stripy things that he had going on, and I found them interesting. You can't help but be inspired by the wonderful work that people have done in the past. And every artist is going to do something in their own way and with their own interpretation. It's one of the most wonderful things about art. Well, if you check out the links below, you'll see some of my sites on Facebook, on Fine Art America, some of the products I sell, and some of the products I like to use. I'll see you next video.